This is your reality check.
Hi everyone, and welcome to The Reality Check, the weekly Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. This is the show for April 9th, 2019, and I'm your host, Darren McKee. With me, as usual, are Adam Gardner.
What's up, Cuboids?
Christina Roach.
Hey everyone.
And producer Pat.
Hi, checkers.
We have a great show for you today. I'm going to talk to you about critical thinking in practice in Egypt.
Nice.
And then Adam is going to answer the question, what is the closest planet to the Earth?
That's right.
But first, social influencers versus the FDA. Christina, who's going to win?
Let's see. Reddit has just been the gift that keeps on giving lately. I stumbled across an Atlantic article via Reddit about Kim Kardashian, who I'm sure needs no introduction.
Oh, sorry, who?
Yeah. It was about Kim's Instagram selfie promoting a drug called Digligis, a prescription-only anti-nausea pill. Now, in Canada, we have the same drug, but it's called Diclectin. Now, we've been known to call out celebrity wellness endorsers before, especially those who promote pseudoscience, but this is a legit FDA-approved drug. Is this a problem? Spoiler, yes, it is.
Oh, good segment. Thank you.
Well, is it a problem versus is it illegal? Like, is it an actual break of any law, I guess, is the question, right?
Exactly. Now, as of last night when I checked, Kim Kardashian has over 133 million Instagram followers.
Oh my.
And over 60 million on Twitter. Big side note here. First major rabbit hole, and there were several of them, led me to something called #SpawnCon. Now, you can file this Kardashian post under Healthcare SpawnCon, and the term refers to when Instagram influencers / celebrities plug products as sponsored content. So, in other words, paid sponsorships.
So I sometimes see #ad or something like that.
Yes.
I'll be like, why is this person randomly talking about this like water product? It's like, oh.
That's right.
Okay, move on and disregard.
I linked to a great Vox article published in February called The Latest Instagram Influencer Frontier Medical Promotions. And it really explains this world of SpawnCon if you're interested, but I'm going to focus specifically on Kim versus the FDA. So in 2015, the FDA issued a warning letter to pharmaceutical company Duchesne, which manufactures Digligis. I'm sure I'm messing that up. After Kim Kardashian posted a selfie holding a bottle of the drug with the text, OMG, have you heard about this? As you guys know, my #morning sickness has been pretty bad. I tried changing things about my lifestyle and my diet, but nothing helped. So I talked to my doctor. He prescribed my Digligis. I felt better, and most importantly, it's been studied, and there's no increased risk to the baby.
So just for context, she's pregnant. That's some context, I guess.
Yes, it's a prescribed anti-nausea drug.
This is when
Mostly for pregnant women?
Yes.
This is when she was pregnant, though.
Yes.
Oh, she's not pregnant now. This is an old post.
This was in 2015.
Okay.
So, out of interest, Christina, do you have any idea how much companies pay for these?
No, I don't. But having seen that Fire doc, if you remember, one of the Kardashians, Kendall Jenner, what was it? For one Instagram post, it was either 50 or 500,000, and either figure is still huge.
I don't
for
know.
one Instagram post.
Yeah.
All right. We need more followers. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. So at the time, just to have some context, she had 42 million followers on Instagram and only 32 million on Twitter.
It's nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Poof. Now, she went on to say that she was partnering with the company to, quote, raise awareness about treating morning sickness. Guess what part she left out? The part that she was paid to do this. In other words, #SpawnCon. The company confirmed, by the way, that she was a paid spokeswoman, so that this isn't speculation. She basically turned her Instagram post into an ad for a pharmaceutical company. And another thing she left out, the side effects, risks, limitations. And that's why the FDA jumped in, threatening action if the post wasn't either deleted or edited to list the typical warnings you hear in U.S. network drug ads all the time. Now, she deleted the post and reposted a hashtag corrective ad a month or so later. I'm not being cute with the hashtags, just so you guys know. These are legit hashtags that they use in the social influencer world to let people know that this is SpawnCon or a corrective ad.
And if she's got that many followers, then even if corrective ad isn't a hashtag, once she posts it, now a bunch of people are going to use it.
Right.
Because you know that people are going to click on her hashtag and see all the crazy crap that other people are posting.
Yeah.
So on a quick search, 6 figures to get one of them to do a single post.
There you go. Mm-hmm. Now, this is unfortunately reflective of a growing problem for the FDA. So here's another rabbit hole. How do you regulate or even just effectively monitor how pharmaceuticals are being marketed in the age of social media influencers?
Well, especially since there's no necessarily borders to this too.
Right.
Oh.
Now, change is a new territory for the FDA, obviously. They've had to adapt since print ads in the early 1900s promoted Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, which relieved your toothache because, of course it did. It had morphine in it. And then radio and TV ads, there was more regulation. The 80s and 90s ushered in fine print warnings, which allowed pharmaceutical companies once again to be able to advertise directly to consumers via all mediums, including the internet. Now back to Kim. Fast forward to 2017, and she posts another Instagram post promoting the same drug, this time with a link to the FDA and, some risks, warnings, etc.
So she was pregnant again? Sorry,
I don't know if she was pregnant at the time. She may have just been, one of her sisters may have been pregnant, but she may have been. But she just reposted it again. And here's the fun twist, guys. This time, experts were criticizing the post because a landmark study was published a few months before that concluded Degledges was ineffective. So when I say a lot of rabbit holes, there were a lot of rabbit holes. A lot of tentacles to this story. Now, more recently, in January 2018, a newly published paper claims the original clinical trial from the 70s, used when FDA approved the drug for the first time, had serious flaws. Dr. Navindra Persaud, a researcher at St. Michael's Hospital and the University of Toronto, found little evidence in the drug's efficacy after reviewing the trial from the 70s. Now, for the sake of time, here's a really great, quick synopsis of the drug from the Daily Mail. An earlier version of the drug with an additional ingredient was first introduced in the 1950s. In the 1970s, Benedictine became an FDA-approved drug to treat morning sickness. It was voluntarily taken off the market in 1983 after several lawsuits claiming it was associated with birth defects.
Ooh.
In 2013, Degledges became approved by the FDA to treat morning sickness. The controversy surrounds the combination of the ingredients doxylamine and pyridoxine, said to increase the risk of birth defects. The original 1970 study was also incomplete, with participants dropping out and unincluded data. So, yeah, he's got some concerns. Those sound like some flaws. I actually read in more detail some of the flaws to the study, and I concur even at a distance. Now, I should note that Dr. Siripanth Napita, a researcher at Harvard Medical School, disagrees. He says studies that have been done since this trial was completed in the 1970s show that doxylamine and pyridoxine are an effective treatment for nausea and vomiting in pregnancy. But he was not involved in this new study at all, just putting that out there. Now, a spokesperson for the pharmaceutical company Duchesne also put out a statement in response to the Canadian researcher Dr. Persaud, who in the Daily Mail article says women should stop taking this drug and speak to their doctors about other options to treat morning sickness. So here's an excerpt from the company statement. This is the company that manufactures the drug in Canada, so it's Diclectin here. Diclectin is the only prescription medication indicated for the treatment of nausea and vomiting of pregnancy approved by Health Canada. It has been prescribed for over 40 years in Canada and has been proven safe and efficacious for use throughout pregnancy.
Now, I have a bunch of thoughts that come to mind. One is sort of the borderless way the internet works. So what if I, as a Canadian person, was approached by a US drug company to put out an ad for their product? Well, does that matter? Does it matter where the server for Instagram is? Does it matter where the person posting it is, or where the company that's giving me the money comes from? So could they have a shell company that's based in another country that doesn't have laws, and have that go through a person who's, traveling in international waters, posting on Instagram? Like there's a lot of things that come to mind that may affect Americans, but kind of be outside of the realm of the FDA. So I wonder how these kind of things could be problems.
I think it's also interesting to think that maybe she actually does take this and thinks it does work, which we know many people take things that they think work and they shouldn't. And so how much fault is there here? Is it deception because she was paid off, or is it just naivete and ignorance?
Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, a lot of celebrities promote just crap that just it's usually teas, weight loss teas and herbal supplements and just stuff that doesn't really do anything. The fact that this is a real drug, to me, seems better. But yeah, obviously the FDA's got their own set of rules that you gotta go by if you're really doing that. And the question comes up of who's really doing something wrong. Is it Kim Kardashian, or is it the drug company that's not properly ensuring that their drug is being marketed properly? Like they can't just push the blame and say I asked someone to put an ad together. It's not my fault they didn't list the side effects.
Or the FDA that didn't do something about it sooner. Got to practice critical thinking everywhere, including in Egypt when you're on vacation. As you may have heard from me talking about it already, I was in Egypt, and I went on a day tour of several pyramids, and separately a cruise which involved many trips to places from the boat and back, lovely temples. While going from place A to place B or C, we often got the message that we didn't have a lot of time, or that we could only spend a certain amount of time in a particular place. But it seems like there was always enough time to stop somewhere to have an opportunity to purchase something. This is what I want to talk to you about today. Anyone who has traveled in tourist destinations, especially in poor countries, knows that there is often someone asking you to buy something. Just have a look. It's free to look. Mm-hmm. They have what you need. And in Egypt, it was as if they all learned a similar script. Where are you from? Canada? Oh, and they know 5 main cities. You name one city, and they have a friend or relative or something that lives there. It happened often enough that you started to wonder if it was true. The first person, oh, that's interesting.
It's probably the same person.
Well, yeah, the same person. But it's like, wow, 4 or 5 people, almost the exact same series of words. It's a script. Anyway, beyond that, when going to a particular tourist destination, there's usually a place that the guides stop at so you can buy something. I assume there are kickbacks, because that's how the world works, but I don't have any data on that.
Yeah,
anyway, I mainly want to discuss 2 of these occurrences. One was an opportunity, I use that in quotes, to buy aromatherapy liquids, and the other was a chance to buy different types of sculptures. Why is this relevant? Well, it is one thing to think critically when reading an article on the internet, listen to a podcast, or anything like that, because you have time to pause and reflect. And it's different to try to do so in real time when faced with added social pressure. We know social media, advertising, and talking heads are competing for our mental real estate, but the competition is often one-sided. You can simply escape this by clicking something else, closing your computer, shutting off the TV, or putting your phone down. Jokes, no one puts their phone down anymore. In this case, though, the situation is entirely different. First, there is the social pressure to even enter the establishment. While it is possible one could just stay in the car, I felt this would be perceived as rude. So already you feel like, oh, I have to go in here, or you're actually not even sure what you're doing. You're just stopping somewhere and then you realize what it is. Perhaps I should embrace the notion that I've paid for a service and I won't be manipulated into even entering the place where they're trying to have me buy things, as I don't want or need them. But instead, I saw it as cultural anthropology and a chance to see what they're doing marketing-wise.
Interesting.
So the first spot was a lovely little aromatherapy place. It's cleaner and nicer than the outside places we were in, so already that's welcoming. Now, keep in mind, in general, you don't really know where you are, and the drivers outside supposedly. So there is this
the driver's like not there with you. He's just like going to the store.
No, the guide joins you.
Yes.
But then he leaves slightly or moves away temporarily.
It's
yes,
like a
exactly.
sense of foreboding.
Well, no, it's you don't feel threatened, but there is in the background, like, my phone did not have a data plan. Yeah. So I don't really know where I am, nor do I have any means to get anywhere else but where I am.
You are in Egypt.
Yeah,
so
exactly. So you enter, they sit you down, one person passes you to another person, and then some nice man gives you a presentation. Of course, they've also brought you a free drink that you've chosen as you're buying into the reciprocal exchange that's happening. Yeah. And I'll admit, I could feel the manipulations being slightly effective. Yeah. It's honestly nice when someone tells you about aromatherapy. I'm not going to lie to you. Even though I don't believe in it at all, it's nice.
Well, not everyone has the background, too, of like coming from a skeptical worldview where you've actually investigated aromatherapy and know that it's crap.
Right.
It's the episode, whatever it was, where I talked about
well done, Adam.
aromatherapy.
Now, it didn't feel so nice that I actually thought it had legitimacy, but it was still nice nonetheless. Mm-hmm. And I tried to imagine how it would feel if I thought it would actually work. Like someone whose mind's who's quote-unquote open-minded enough to see that it might work. So the presenter would introduce a particular substance. He would put a few drops in something, like a larger decanter, or perhaps even on your wrist, swish it around, and then we would smell it. I was with a friend. Ooh, right? You're supposed to give this opportunity, and it does smell nice. And there's a nice story about what it's going to do, right?
Maybe I feel calm.
Exactly. This one will calm you down if you just smell the fragrance of this. Oh, this one supposedly has a impact on virility and the passions.
Ooh,
exactly.
Passions.
The passions. Exactly. I even got this nice little handout. You can hear the prop, everyone.
Nice.
Is the ancient science of healing, relaxing, and energizing by the use of plants and their parts? It starts off with a question. Extravagant aromatherapy. It has been used for thousands of years during the ancient Egyptian civilization. So you have a bit of an argument from antiquity there. Although, it's not like they did that well. Their civilization collapsed twice. And it's one of the most popular branches of alternative medicines. But notice to us, it's one of the most popular branches of alternative medicine. Makes it sound worse. Yes. But for the average person, like, well, this is the argument ad populum, right? It's popular.
That term does not have the same baggage with everybody.
Exactly. Now, in case you weren't sure, the word aromatherapy, and I'm quoting here, is derived from two words: aroma, which means smell, and therapy, which stands for healing. Mainly for external use. And then they talk about mint and eucalyptus and lavender and bergamot and royal amber and frankincense and black seed oil and all these different oils. Mm-hmm. All right? Mm-hmm. Now, the mint one, which is used for, cold, flu, bronchitis, everything, is what stood out to me as, nose blocking, throat infections, exactly. Let that Robitussin seep right in. So the mint one was interesting because he swirled it around, and my friend inhaled it before I did, and she had a very strong reaction. So immediately I'm like, okay, this is going to be a strong reaction. Mm-hmm. And then I inhaled it and it felt like it went right through my brain. Now, this didn't happen, of course, because that's not how things work. It was just my nasal cavity, but it was one of the most intense experiences I've ever had. It's like imagining, again, like a Vicks vapor rub in your brain. Mm-hmm. It was so powerful. And you're like, well, it's so powerful, it must clean out things because now I feel minted throughout my nasal cavity. But of course, that's not really how we know things work. So all that to say, this is very compelling, right? It has a large effect. This man's very nice. There's a drink. You're inside. And then you're like, so, can we leave now? And so it actually does take some like internal fortitude to just look at someone who's nice. You're sitting down, they're standing, and you're just like, no thanks. They go through the prices and you're like, well, that's really nice. What to do, right? So we politely extracted ourselves from the situation, but I still felt a bit badly. Yeah. But I tried to channel that into being displeased at the whole situation, how they tried to manipulate me. Yeah. Well, you got to do something to work on the cognitions. Yeah. Well, at the same time, not faulting the people for just trying to do their living, right? That's how it goes. Yeah. Now, every step of it, though, leads you to feel more inclined to do something for them. Like, of course, buy their product.
Yeah. The more time you've invested into the situation, the more guilt they kind of put on you for taking up their time.
Oh, exactly.
It's all part of the...
Exactly. So a similar thing occurred when we were driven to a place with ceramics and statues and little whatnots. There was, I would say a show, but there was a demonstration. It was a bit like a show, right? There's 4 guys who are out front, and they're sitting down, and they're trying to show you the different stages of how a statue might come to exist. And there's another man who's giving you an overview, and then our guide is a separate person who has kind of now passed us off to these people, right? And he's trying to show us how one is the good granite and one is the fake granite. And you're like, oh, I guess the wrong one. Okay. But anyway, the 4 guys, one would pretend to carve the initial rock, and then there's a refinement, then a dusting, and then a polish. but it's just like kabuki theater. It was so comical to me. It should have been in a Coen Brothers movie. I wanted to film it, but I thought it would be insulting because you can see they know their roles, but as soon as that's it. Like, it's not like they're really doing it. So they have 30 seconds of activity and then they pretend and then they do nothing again.
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of funny. In short, demonstration, you're involved in the demonstration, another free drink, and then an implication you should buy something. In this wonderful place with all these different statues, some of which are quite pretty, we're now the only people in there walking around.
And no pseudoscience attached to this one.
No.
It's just a nice little statue. Right?
No, exactly. All these little statues, exactly. Made right in front of you, supposedly.
Yeah.
It was more just, again, the social pressure.
Yeah.
Now, my friend did see a little obelisk, and Egypt is known for those. And we paid $7 US after it started at 25 US. So you never quite know, as people have also been to other countries, what things actually cost, what's a line, and what's not too insulting. And is that line, a good compromise is something that leaves everyone unhappy. Where if it's worth it, they'll sell it, but to what extent, right?
Maybe they're selling it because there's a sunken cost and they're like, whatever, you know.
Right. Now, as people who listen know that I'm concerned about giving money to poor people, that's fine. If that's how you want to do it through like I'm overpaying for this good and I don't really care about it, that's one way of doing it. I'd rather try to channel it to probably someone else who might even need it more. Sure. But all that to say, we even did okay, we're literally walking away, and then eventually they caved.
Wow.
But it's like
but
this
isn't that
game.
a game? Like,
yes,
it's almost insulting if you don't play that game.
Well, I don't know about
where
that.
You are, right?
Yeah, I think it's probably more insulting if you pay them less money. I think they probably care more about you just giving them more money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and, here it depends, as I said, on mental accounting and how you allocate your resources. But I don't want to overpay something even if it's in a poorer country. Mm-hmm. So, what lessons are from all of this? If you find yourself on some day trip or situation in a tourist country, it is highly likely that you will stop somewhere and feel some pressure to buy things. If you've never experienced this is just a heads up. That's probably going to happen.
Yeah.
If it's just you and your travel companions, this will feel even greater because there isn't a larger crowd to distribute the supposed responsibility to buy something.
So if no one else in my tourist group is buying anything, then it's fine.
But if you're on a private tour, it's just you and if no one else, okay, it's more awkward.
Yep. For sure.
If they give you a demonstration, this will seem pleasant or nice, and the pressure will be greater. If they give you a free drink, the pressure will be greater still. Mm-hmm. I wanted to cut through it and not waste their time, but in the moment, that actually felt worse. Like you couldn't transcend the context.
Yes.
Say, look, I really appreciate what you're trying to do. You're trying to get your hustle. We're not interested. I don't want to waste your time. But that would have seemed more insulting than, in a way, wasting their time.
Yeah, in some situations there's a way to say that, but
no.
It sounds like in this one there isn't one.
No, there's
right.
No,
if someone randomly approaches you to try to sell you a bag on the street, you can just say, "Sorry, I'm not interested," and move on. But,
yes, multiple times a day in Egypt, people would approach me, and I would try not to waste their time.
Selfie stick or whatever.
Yeah. So you go through it, and you just realize they're trying to manipulate you, and if you want to buy the thing, of course, by all means, go ahead. But if you had no intention of buying the thing before the forced stop and show, I just think it's interesting to try to think of the social pressure that's being used and the different ways we can use critical thinking to try to combat all those aspects of social pressure. Because as Christina said, it is kind of like a game. But when you're in it, it feels very differently. Now we turn to Adam, who will explore what the closest planet to Earth is, which I assume is the twin Earth that's hiding in dark matter.
Okay. Now the order of the planets in our solar system is Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and then, Pluto isn't a planet anymore, so that's the end.
Asterisks.
Now these are listed in their order of their distance from the Sun, with Mercury being the closest at about 46 million kilometers, followed by Venus, 107 million kilometers, then Earth, 147 million kilometers, and then Mars, 205 million kilometers. So, which planet would you say is closest to the Earth? I will ask the panel. Darren, you want to start?
Well, since the solar system is entirely stationary and never moves, it might depend, Adam, on the rotation of the things. So at different points, I'd say Venus and Mars, of course. Now, I wonder, though, if Mercury ever gets in there.
So on average,
Venus is closest.
All right.
So my very excellent mother says it's Venus, but I've actually been following the news on this, so I know what you're going to say.
Okay.
Well, I would say it's Venus as well.
Okay. Now, a new study is putting the answer to the question on what planet is on average closest to the Earth in doubt. But I wonder, is that even a question people ask? Now, I recall learning a fact on an old astronomy show narrated by Thomas Selleck that the distances from the sun to the...
Wait, sorry. As in Magnum P.I.?
As in Magnum P.I., you did some narration for some kind of show on astronomy that I watched as a child / teenager.
I think he's best known as 1/3 of 3 Men and a Baby.
Right.
So basically, Tom Selleck taught me that the distances from the sun for the first 4 planets was pretty linear, meaning that Venus's orbit is about twice as far from the sun as Mercury's, Earth's is about 3 times as far as Mercury, and Mars's orbit is about 4 times the distance from the sun as Mercury. Now, this system falls apart a bit with Jupiter, with it being so large and with there being an asteroid belt at the location where the 5th planet could have been or maybe had been, depending who you talk to. So, if you're just considering the distance between orbits, the Earth is slightly closest to Venus, and Venus's orbit is closer to the Earth's than Mars's. So this all changes, however, when we look at the average distances between planets. So to simplify things, we can just consider that all planets in our solar system have circular orbits and that they are coplanar, meaning that the solar system would be flat. In truth, it's a bit more complicated as the planets have a slightly elliptical orbit. That said, the answer to these questions is the same if we simplify to circular orbits, and it makes it a bit easier to conceptualize if you want to kind of picture the solar system in your mind. So if we think of all orbits as being circular, then the distance between orbits is actually the closest 2 planets will come to each other. If the Earth is 147 million kilometers from the sun, and Venus is 107 million kilometers from the sun, then they are actually 40 million kilometers from each other only once per orbit when they are closest to each other. Okay. In the extreme situation where they are on opposite sides of the sun, they're actually 254 million kilometers from each other, that being the sum of their 2 orbits. Okay. So let's instead look at the average orbit. Without thinking about it too much, one might be inclined to think that Venus is still closest to the Earth on average, but the actual answer is Mercury. Now, it's hard to think of, but basically, if you use mathematical formulas or a simulation to calculate the average distance, it ends up being Mercury. It ends up being the planet that's closest to the sun. Now, I'll try to simplify this enough to explain this in a way which may be a bit intuitive. Now, I'd love to draw this, but it's an audio podcast, so that wouldn't do much good. So I'm going to try to explain this. If you can picture it in your mind, if you're driving, try not to close your eyes. That might cause some problems. So if you can, try to picture 3 concentric circles. So those being the orbits of Mercury, Venus, and the Earth. So 3 circles with the same center. For simplicity's sake, the distance between these circles can be the same, as it's roughly the case for the planets in our solar system, but the distances don't actually matter if you really get down to the math. Now, the closest point between the outermost circle, that is the Earth, and the second circle, that being Venus, is closer than that between the outermost circle, Earth, and the innermost circle, this being Mercury. Now, instead, notice the distance between the lowest point in the outer circle, the one we're considering to be the Earth, and the furthest point on the top for the second circle would be Venus, which is greater than the distance between that lower point, and the same furthest point at the top of the inner circle for Mercury. So Venus, when it is furthest from the Earth, is further away than Mercury when it is furthest from the Earth. Okay, so that's an important consideration. So one might be inclined to think that these would roughly cancel each other out because the distance from which it's further away at its furthest point is of an equal length to how close it is. But now let's think of some other points on the circle. Now picture a horizontal line going through the 3 circles, which basically intersects all 3 of these concentric circles. Now consider the lower point of the outer circle to be Earth, and we're trying to basically see where those planets would be when they're about 90 degrees away in their rotation. Okay, so along that line where we would have cut those circles. If you average these points, the Earth would actually be closer to Mercury, the innermost circle, than it would be to Venus, the second circle, when you're looking on the plane that's by dissecting it on the horizontal. All right. And this ends up being true for a lot of points on the circle. So in a lot of times, Mercury is actually going to be closer to the Earth than Venus.
And
even though Venus is closest on its closest point.
Right. Is that mainly because the orbit of Mercury is so small? In a way, like conceptually, that's what I'm trying to imagine.
Yep.
Because it's so small, Venus is bigger, but that means it's further away.
Yeah. It gets further away. So it's always going to be true that the closer something is to the center, the closer that orbit is to the center, the closer it is on average to Earth. So the sun is also closer to the Earth on average than Mercury.
Uh-huh. I was also going to say, but that also depends on the orbit. Like if they actually have the same so-called year, then it would be very different.
Sure. So yes. So obviously orbits aren't going at the same speed. So like if the Earth and Venus rotate around the sun at the exact same, then they would always be close to each other. But that would never keep. That would never stay.
No, but here you go. For the mathematically inclined listener, what percentage close to exact would have to be the case for it to actually be functional that way? Is it 95%? Is it 90%? Is it 80%?
I think at the end of the day, what's going to end up happening is that the speed of a rotation is going to vary depending on its distance from the star. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you have the further out planets that take years, potentially hundreds of years to rotate, right?
True.
So at the end of the day, those forces would even each other out, and then one would end up going faster, and then it would.
Kepler's laws say that the closer you are to the body that you're rotating, the faster you go.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So if you tweak that by putting more weight on or more mass on one body than another, could you actually get it to be close to the same? Maybe for a short time, but eventually they're going to come and get out of sync. The question I kind of asked myself was, it's unintuitive, but does this matter? And is this a claim that people really make? Like, is this really a fact that people really think about? Now, the study which showed it in Physics Today mentioned a number of websites which incorrectly claim that the Earth is closest on average to Venus. Now, one such site, theplanets.org, explained how the distances vary depending on their place in the orbits, and then gives a calculator and table which claims to show the average distance, but then that average distance is only really the difference between the orbits. So they really kind of made a big mistake there. But I wonder if this is really something that people think about. Now, we learn about the distances of planets from the sun, but we don't really talk about distances from the Earth, or maybe that's something I feel that doesn't come up very often. I think most astronomers would understand that distances vary widely, and that the average distance might not be something that has much value. The minimum distance is very much something we would care about, as we can observe planets more optimally when they're closest to the Earth. Even when we consider sending probes, or hopefully someday sending spaceships between planets, we generally do so when those planets are at their closest. It's a bit more complicated than that. The distances it takes to travel is long enough that the trip needs to be started while they aren't actually at their closest, but they do tie the orbits to the time that they would intersect as a major factor in that trip. So much to say, no one's looking to send someone to Mars when it's on the other side of the sun. Similarly, an astronomer has a harder time looking at Venus in a telescope when Venus and the Earth are at opposite ends of the solar system. The practical reason for this is that we can't easily observe planets in broad daylight, but there are other reasons. Just you don't observe the planet when they're at their furthest, or you can, but that's not the best time to do it. Now, looking at this in the opposite way, however, doesn't really help us. Closest planet to Mercury is Venus, followed by the Earth, then Mars. Closest planet to Venus is Mercury, followed by the Earth, then Mars. The closest planet to Mars is Mercury, then Venus, then the Earth, then Jupiter. So whenever you do what is the closest planet to this planet, you start at the middle of the solar system and you work your way up. Even if you had, like Darren mentioned, a negative Earth, another planet that had the exact same orbit as the Earth, but was at a different speed or went in a different direction, that planet would be further from the Earth, on average, than the Sun, Mercury, and Venus. Even though, when they would be at their closest, they would be pretty much at the same point. So it's hard to kind of conceptually think about it, but when you kind of break it down and try to picture it, that's how it works, and the formulas kind of back it up.
So the closest planet to Neptune is?
Mercury.
That's what I thought you were going to say. Okay,
yes.
just making sure, yep.
So it's not obvious, but
yeah.
That's how the math works out.
And that stuff's really far away, which makes it even more interesting.
Yes. Yeah. But to Neptune, Mercury has this like very small circular orbit that's really far away, right near the sun, right? Mm-hmm. So it turns out that Mercury is, on average, the closest planet to the Earth. Venus is, however, the planet which comes closest to the Earth, which means at optimal times it is easier to observe from the Earth than the other planets, assuming its orbit isn't so close that the Sun is still out. Unless, of course, we're looking to see a Venus transit in front of the Sun, which is actually a very cool thing that happened a few years ago. So what does this all mean? Well, I'm not sure it's dispelling any particularly common misconception, but it does stress that it's important to stop and think about things which may not be terribly intuitive. It's also important to think about averages and how they differ from means and things like that. And there's more math that we could get into with that, but there's a lot of sort of intuitive things that come up with averages sometimes. Now, thanks ahead of time to Stuart for writing in to correct a few things that I might have gotten wrong in this segment.
Yes, I was going to say, hey, I know someone we can ask some stuff.
It's just a test to see if he's listening.
Yeah.
Thanks, Adam. And thanks for joining us, listeners. We got the FDA, social pressure, and astronomy all in one. Christina talked to us about social influencers and how the FDA will get on them sometimes if they do something somewhat wrong, and no one really care. We do, though. And I talked to you about critical thinking in practice in case you happen to be in situations where you're being socially pressured to buy something. Just try to take a moment and realize what's happening and try to apply the tools that hopefully we've helped you cultivate. And finally, Adam looked into whether the closest planet to the Earth is Mercury, Venus, Earth, or Mars, and it's going to be Mercury. Until next time, think better to act better.
Peace out, cute woods.
Stay classy, not smart-assy.
We'll talk to you next week, everyone.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at @TRC_podcast.